The lights in the ballroom flickered for half a second. No one noticed. No one but me. By then, I was already inside. Past security. Past the velvet ropes. Past the guest list that didn't have my name. I shouldn't have been there. But I was. Table 14. Third seat from the left. That's where she was sitting. Laughing. Smiling like nothing outside that room had ever touched her. A wine glass in one hand. Her other hand resting gently, far too gently, on the wrist of the man beside her. He wasn't wearing a ring. There were over 200 people in that room. And somehow, she looked completely alone with him. I stayed in the shadows. Waiters drifted by like ghosts, carrying trays of food no one touched. A jazz quartet played something elegant, forgettable. Everything was soft, the lighting, the music, the lies. And yet, every nerve in my body was screaming. She had told me the event was rescheduled, that there was no point in me coming. It's just a boring quarterly review, she had said. All numbers and awards for departments I don't even work in. Strange. She looked very involved now. At 9:17 p.m., she leaned in and whispered something in his ear. His face changed, slow at first, then completely. Not just a smile. A hunger. She had never looked at me that way. I moved closer, just enough to hear. I booked the room upstairs, she murmured. Same as last time. My throat dried instantly. My ears rang. But she wasn't done. I don't know how much longer I can pretend at home. And he said nothing. He didn't have to. Because this wasn't the beginning of something. It was the continuation of something I had never been part of. I didn't leave. I should have. Every cell in my body told me to walk out, vanish before I saw anything else. But I couldn't move. Not because I was frozen, but because I needed to see what she looked like when she thought no one was watching. Not her coworkers. Not her boss. Not me. I needed to know who she really was when the curtain fell. So I stayed hidden, halfway behind a marble column near the bar, pretending to be on my phone, like any other bored spouse waiting to go home. But I wasn't like them. I wasn't invited. The strange part was, I didn't watch her face directly anymore. I started watching her in the mirrored surface behind the bar, where her expression looked less posed, less polished. In that reflection, she didn't look like the woman I came home to every night. She looked freer, younger, reckless. The man beside her, I didn't know his name, but he had the kind of face that didn't need one. Charismatic, tanned in a way that said executive retreat more than vacation, wearing a suit so sharp it looked like it would cut anyone who got too close. He kept brushing imaginary lint from his jacket sleeve whenever she spoke, like even her voice clung to him. I hated him instantly, but I hated her more in that moment. And I hated myself for thinking that. The next part was harder to watch. She pulled her phone from her clutch, tapped something quickly, smiled. My phone buzzed. Sorry, just got back to my room. Exhausted. Event ran long. Tell you everything in the morning, blue heart. She was still seated at the table, still smiling at someone else, still lying, like she'd done this 1,000 times before and perfected the exact emoji ratio to soften the deceit. I stared at her message for a full minute. My fingers hovered over the screen like I might type something, anything, but I didn't. What could I say? I'm at your event. I watched you text me from 10 feet away. That wasn't how this was supposed to happen. I had come here hoping, somehow, that I'd been wrong. That the voice in my head that had kept me up at night was just paranoia, insecurity, some leftover scar from the past. But this wasn't imagined. This was real. And then, just when I thought I had seen enough, the room shifted. The man beside her stood, buttoned his jacket, and reached his hand toward her. Not for a handshake, not to help her up, but like they'd done this many times. Darla took it without hesitation. No glance over her shoulder. No pause. No guilt. They walked off together through the back hallway near the staff entrance. The hallway I had come through. And I followed. The service hallway behind the ballroom was dimly lit and strangely cold, like it belonged to a completely different building. Gone were the golden chandeliers and velvet ropes. This corridor was all linoleum and humming pipes, stained ceiling tiles, and that faint chemical smell that always clings to industrial floors. The kind of place where people go to be unseen. They were already halfway down the hall when I turned the corner, just far enough ahead to pretend they didn't hear my footsteps. But I wasn't exactly being careful. I wanted to be caught, maybe. Or maybe I wanted her to turn around, look me in the eye, and end this damn thing out loud instead of carving it into me one silent betrayal at a time. But she didn't. He pressed the button for the elevator. She stood beside him like they were waiting for an Uber, casual, unbothered. I ducked into a janitor's alcove just as they turned their heads. My heart was thudding so hard it echoed in my ears. There were no cameras back here. No witnesses. Just peeling paint and the unbearable weight of knowing too much. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. They stepped in. I caught a glimpse before the doors closed. She touched the small of his back. He kissed her on the cheek. That was it. The doors sealed them away. I didn't know what floor they were going to, but I didn't need to. There were only 5 floors above this one. I ran for the stairs, nearly slipping on the first step. My knees ached with each flight, but adrenaline masked it. I paused at each landing, cracking the stairwell door open just an inch to listen. Floor 2, nothing. Floor 3, muffled voices in the distance, but not them. Floor 4, silence. Floor 5, a ding. The elevator. I didn't move. I just crouched low and waited by the door. My chest was burning. My mouth was dry. Every part of me screamed that this was a mistake, that no good could come from watching whatever I was about to see. And then I saw them. They didn't walk out of the elevator quickly, or like they were trying to sneak around. They walked like they'd done this before. Like this was routine. Like the hallway to room 521 was more familiar than our own home. The worst part? She was laughing. A real, belly-deep laugh. Not the polite kind you reserve for colleagues or awkward conversations. The kind she used to give me on Sunday mornings when we'd eat breakfast in bed and talk about nothing. The kind I hadn't heard in 2 years. I didn't follow them into the hallway. I couldn't. My body refused to move. I stayed crouched behind the stairwell door, one eye peeking through a crack, watching as she slid the keycard into the lock like it was muscle memory. The green light blinked. The door clicked open. They disappeared inside, and I was left alone with the sound of that door closing. But I wasn't done. I needed proof, and that meant doing something I never imagined I'd do. I don't know how long I stood outside that room. Long enough for the hallway to cycle through silence and footsteps, laughter and doors slamming elsewhere. Hotel hallways are strange places. They hum with movement, but feel like liminal spaces, as if time slows down the moment you stop walking. That's how it felt outside room 521. Like time had paused, just for me, so I could decide what kind of man I really was. I wanted to leave. I didn't. Instead, I walked to the room directly next to theirs, room 520, and knocked like I belonged there. No answer. I knocked again, louder, glancing over my shoulder. The hallway was empty. Still nothing. Then I tried the handle. Unlocked. It was like the universe wanted me to keep unraveling. The room was dark and empty, barely used, judging by the bed still tucked military tight, and the air stale like the window hadn't been opened in days. I shut the door quietly behind me and stood in the dark for a moment, surrounded by beige wallpaper and corporate art. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't even move at first. I just leaned my head against the shared wall between 520 and 521, the one I knew separated me from her. The wall was thin, thinner than I'd prepared for. I didn't hear moaning or anything cliché. That would have been merciful in a sick way. Instead, I heard them talking. Not flirting. Talking. Normal voices. The kind that make it worse because they're casual. Intimate. Like nothing about what they were doing was wrong. She told him about the cat, how it scratched the couch again, and how I still refused to buy the spray she'd recommended. They laughed about it like I was some clueless sitcom husband. She said I still ate cereal for dinner when she traveled, that I kept forgetting garbage night. And then she said something that twisted my stomach into a knot I still haven't untied. I think I stopped loving him when I realized he couldn't tell the difference between me being tired and me being gone. He didn't respond for a moment. Then he said, "So, when are you going to tell him?" She didn't hesitate. "Soon. I just need to find the right lie." That sentence hit me harder than anything else that night. Not the fact that she was cheating. Not the room. Not even hearing her kiss him through the drywall. It was the calculation in her voice. She wasn't struggling to end things. She was planning how to keep me just long enough. For convenience. For cover. For control. I stumbled back from the wall like it burned me. My legs nearly gave out. I sat on the edge of the untouched bed, gripping the sides like the room was spinning, and maybe it was. My mind couldn't hold the weight of her voice anymore. It cracked under it. I didn't cry. Not yet. I opened my phone. Not to call her. Not to confront him. I opened the voice recorder. I held it against the wall. And I waited. If I was going to lose everything, I needed to make sure I heard the fall. The sound quality was poor, muffled, but clear enough. You could hear her voice when she laughed, soft and breathy. You could hear his when it dipped into that low, deliberate tone men use when they're trying to feel powerful without raising their volume. But what haunted me most was the silence in between, the long pauses where their familiarity said more than their words. I sat in that dark hotel room, recording minute after minute of a life I wasn't invited to. It wasn't just an affair. It was a version of her I never knew. A version of her who mocked the way I snored, who said I stopped trying after we got married, who said I used to be passionate, but somewhere along the way turned into a soft ghost of a man. Those were her words. A soft ghost of a man. And the worst part was, she wasn't even angry when she said it. There was no heat, no pain. It was just a summary. A line from a story she'd already finished writing. He asked her if she'd ever regretted marrying me. I held my breath like I was underwater. She didn't answer at first. Then, not at the time. Not at the time. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the screen of my phone. I wiped it quickly, like she might somehow see me through the wall. That's how insane I'd started to feel, like her betrayal was leaking through the drywall into my skin. But then, something shifted. The conversation changed. Became sharper. He asked about her emails. If I'd ever gotten suspicious. She said no, that I never looked. That I trusted her too much. He laughed. She didn't. She whispered something then, but I caught it clearly. I've been using his laptop for the shared files. I delete everything. He wouldn't know how to find a breadcrumb if it was glued to his forehead. My heart stopped. My laptop? She used my laptop. That's how she was communicating with him. Using my machine, then wiping the history like it never happened. Like I was so irrelevant. She could use my tools to build the story that would ruin me. I should have stood up. I should have marched over there and kicked in the door. But I couldn't. Because suddenly this wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure. She wasn't just hiding him from me. She was hiding me from her world. She'd rewritten our life so thoroughly that I wasn't even a person anymore. Just an obstacle, a shadow. Someone to lie to with a straight face while she printed boarding passes and packed for conferences. I thought about all the nights I sat at home, microwaving leftovers, feeding the cat, leaving her texts that got one-word answers, and realizing that those nights had names. Places. Hotel rooms like this one. That's when the idea hit me. I would find her laptop backups. Even if she thought she deleted everything, I knew a trick or two she didn't. I might be quiet, but I fix clocks for a living. Nothing goes unnoticed when your job depends on detecting what's out of place. I stood up, phone still recording, and walked out of the room. No plan. No grand revenge. Just one purpose. I needed to resurrect the version of me she'd buried. I made it home before she did. That alone was a small miracle, considering how I drove. The streets were a blur. At one red light, I sat gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned bone white, and I still couldn't feel my hands. I don't remember most of the drive. What I do remember is the silence when I walked in. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of her, like the apartment already knew what I had learned. The cat meowed from the windowsill and blinked at me with that bored, suspicious look he always gave me when I was late with dinner. I poured him food and stood in the kitchen like a stranger. For 15 full minutes, I didn't move. Then I turned toward her office. She always kept the laptop in the second drawer of her desk, neatly coiled charger next to it, like everything else in her life. I knew the password. It hadn't changed in years, her old university ID and her mother's birth year. I typed it in. The screen glowed. Empty desktop. Too empty. Even her recycling bin was wiped. No browser history. No logins. No saved passwords. Nothing but a single folder named Work Travel, which was filled with invoices and PDFs. I scanned every document. Boring. Harmless. But I knew her too well. She wouldn't hide anything where it was supposed to be. She was smarter than that. Just not smarter than me, not tonight. I opened a command terminal. Ran a few forensic tools. Pulled up hidden directories. Then, after a few layers of system-level scanning, I found it. Archive_temp1. A hidden folder with over 2 gigabytes of content. Mostly email exports and saved HTML pages. They'd been deleted, but not overwritten. She must have backed them up before each trip, then wiped them when she came home, thinking she was being careful. I restored them all. What I found was not what I expected. Yes, there were emails to him. Dozens. Hundreds. But they didn't start romantic. They didn't even sound flirtatious in the beginning. What they sounded like was collusion. Long threads about bank statements, account transfers, alternate billing names, and something marked only as Phase 2. I scrolled through a spreadsheet she'd renamed as Expense Log 2024, nothing suspicious about the name. But inside, it was a timeline, with dates, people, flight numbers, cross-referenced credit card charges that didn't show up on our shared account. She wasn't just cheating. She was building something. And not alone. This man wasn't just some affair. He was a partner. A co-conspirator. That's when the front door opened. I didn't panic. I didn't even close the laptop. I just sat there, perfectly still, as her heels clicked lightly against the hardwood floor. She paused in the hallway, probably checking her reflection in the mirror like she always did after a long night out, then walked into the kitchen. I heard her open the fridge, pour something. The quiet clink of glass against granite. Then Clive. I didn't answer. She stepped into the doorway of her office and froze. I didn't look at her. I just asked calmly, "What's Phase 2?" She didn't speak. I turned the laptop toward her. The screen glowed bright in the dark room, outlining her face. That was the moment she realized I knew everything. And yet, she still didn't say a word. Not Clive, I can explain. Not, it's not what it looks like. Not even sorry. She just exhaled, slow and silent. Like this was inconvenient. Like I'd interrupted something bigger. And for the first time, I realized. I had no idea what I was actually dealing with. The silence between us stretched so long it felt like the walls were leaning in to listen. Her face remained unreadable. Not frightened. Not ashamed. Just neutral. As if I'd opened the wrong email at the wrong time and mildly inconvenienced her evening. "Clive," she said finally, like she was testing the word. Like she wasn't sure what version of me had come back from that hotel. "Where did you get that folder?" "Don't insult me," I replied. "You used my laptop to plan this. You really thought I wouldn't figure it out eventually?" She looked down at the screen. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she walked to the desk and slowly closed the laptop, as if that could make everything go away. "You don't understand what you've seen." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how absurd that sentence was. "You mean the offshore transfers? The fake consulting fees? The emails to someone named G. Shaw asking for forged travel records and new IDs?" She froze. That name landed harder than anything else. I didn't stop. I couldn't. "You're not just cheating. You're laundering money. You're rerouting funds from a company account that isn't yours to touch. You're using my name for backup housing leases. And you have the audacity to look me in the eye and tell me I don't understand?" Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. And then she sat down. Just sat. Slowly. Carefully. As if her legs didn't trust her weight anymore. "I never meant for you to find that," she said finally. "It was supposed to be clean. Quiet." "Oh, thank you," I spat. "Glad to know you were trying to commit your crimes with some goddamn etiquette." "No," she said, sharper now. "I meant safe. For both of us." I stared at her. And that's when I understood. This wasn't about love. Or lust. Or even betrayal in the traditional sense. This was strategy. "What exactly is Phase 2, Darla?" I asked again, calmer this time. She didn't answer for a while. Then, in a voice I had never heard from her, not even in fights, she said, "I needed to dissolve the marriage, legally, with cause. But you're too clean. No debt. No vices. No scandal. If I divorced you for boredom, I'd owe you more than half of everything. But if you disappeared, not literally, just reputationally, it would all shift." I couldn't breathe. "You were going to destroy me on paper. I was going to make it look like you'd left. Like you took a payout and vanished. A nervous breakdown. Maybe an affair of your own. Something believable. Something pathetic. I already had the story outlined." "You wrote a script for my breakdown," I whispered. She nodded. The terrifying part was how unemotional she looked about it. Not evil. Not even triumphant. Just done. Like she was already living in the next chapter and had no interest in revisiting this one. "I would have left you with something," she added. "A cabin in Montana. A stipend. An offshore account under a different name. You wouldn't have been hurt. You just wouldn't be Clive anymore." I sat back in the chair. The room was spinning, but not from shock anymore. From clarity. She was finished with me. Not emotionally, not even financially, but existentially. I wasn't a person to her. I was a problem. A variable to be managed. A legacy asset. And she had the whole damn process planned out like it was a corporate merger. "I was going to protect you," she said again. You were going to erase me. The tears came then, not hers. Mine. But they weren't from heartbreak. Not anymore. They were from rage. From disbelief. From the sickening, suffocating realization that I hadn't just lost my wife. I'd been living with a stranger who wore her skin like a uniform. And I wasn't done uncovering the truth. Not even close. The morning after felt surreal. She was gone when I woke up. The air was heavy with the weight of everything left unsaid. The laptop closed. The folder now copied to a backup drive in my coat pocket. And the faint smell of her perfume still lingering like a ghost that hadn't gotten the memo. It wasn't welcome here anymore. I made coffee. Sat in silence. No radio. No phone. Just the slow hum of morning and the crackle of something shifting inside me. Something that hadn't moved in years. Strength. Not rage. Not spite. Something sturdier. That day, I didn't call the police. I didn't storm into her company and expose the whole web of lies. Not yet. That would have made me just a shadow of her, another manipulator pulling strings for a quick win. Instead, I went to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. The one I knew had represented her firm in the past. It took 4 hours, but by the time I walked out of that office, I had the kind of protection I never knew I'd need. Full forensic reports on my laptop, sworn statements from a data recovery specialist, time-stamped audio recordings, and a paper trail connecting everything back to her and her partner in crime. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. I served the divorce papers that week, with cause. Financial misconduct, identity manipulation, premeditated fraud. My lawyer told me she'd fold fast. She did. 2 days later, I got an email from a new address I didn't recognize. It simply said, "You win. I never wanted a war. Just a way out." I didn't reply. Instead, I started fixing things. I renovated the apartment, painted the walls, got rid of every piece of furniture she had picked out. I went to the animal shelter and got a second cat, so the first one wouldn't be lonely. His name is Radish. They hate each other. It's perfect. I started doing the thing I'd been putting off for years, turning my tiny clock repair hobby into a real business. I took on more clients, launched a website, even got profiled in a local magazine. People like stories about the quiet guy who saved himself. And somewhere in all of that, I started sleeping again, not just closing my eyes and waiting for the world to fade. Real sleep. The kind that comes when the monsters have names, and those names no longer belong to you. One afternoon, about 7 months after she vanished for good, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a short, handwritten note inside. "You were never supposed to be collateral. I hope you find someone who sees you." No name. No apology. Just the last sentence she would ever send me. I burned it. Because she was wrong about one thing. I didn't need to be seen by someone else. I just needed to see myself again. And I finally did.